Welcome to understand SDG 16, Peace, Justice and Strong Institutions. Promote peaceful, just and inclusive societies with strong institutions and access to justice for all. Let's review about SDG 16.
So, here's a fascinating question for you. What happens when a country has one of the absolute best digital identity systems in the world, but also one of the weakest legal systems? Well, that's the paradox we're jumping into today. It's a story of incredible innovation and really deep institutional challenges, all happening in the very same place.
I mean, just look at this contrast. On one side, you've got this super sophisticated, world-class national identity system. And on the other, the World Justice Project ranks the country an incredible 129th out of 142 countries for rule of law. That's a top-tier success story and a bottom-tier struggle, literally existing side by side.
So that's the big question for us today, right? How can both of these things be true at the same time? How can a country be so good at one part of governance and face such massive hurdles in another? To figure this out, we've got to look at what's written down on paper versus what's actually happening on the ground.
To start untangling this whole paradox, we have to begin with the foundation. And on paper, that foundation looks incredibly strong. Pakistan actually has a really robust legal and institutional framework that is designed to deliver justice, security, and accountability.
This framework covers pretty much all the bases. First up, you've got a constitution that guarantees fundamental rights and an independent judiciary. Then there's this multi-layered anti-corruption setup, with agencies like the National Accountability Bureau, or NAB. Third, there's a huge national action plan for security. And finally, you have things like Progressive Right to Information Acts. The architecture, the blueprint for good governance, it's all there.
And here is a perfect example of that architecture working brilliantly. Get this, 96%. That is the percentage of Pakistani adults registered by NADRA, the National Database and Registration Authority. This is a genuinely world-class achievement. It's the backbone for everything from voting to banking. It's absolute proof that high-level, effective governance is possible. But that's only half the story.
Okay, so now let's flip the coin and look at the other side of this paradox. Because when we shift from the laws on the books to the reality on the ground, a very different and much more troubling picture starts to emerge.
Take a look at this number. Over 2 million. That is the backlog of court cases just clogging up the country's entire judicial system. And that's not just some abstract statistic. It is a massive barrier to justice. It means years and years of waiting for millions of people.
And here's where you see the direct human cost of that backlog. A staggering 70% of Pakistan's entire prison population is made up of unsentenced detainees. Just think about that. These are people who are just waiting for their trial, often for years, stuck in this limbo because the system is just too overwhelmed to hear their cases.
And these challenges aren't just in the courts. They extend to personal safety. In that very same index that measures rule of law, Pakistan ranks 140th out of 142 countries on order and security. We're talking about near the very bottom of the global list. This really shows the daily impact of crime and violence, and it's such a stark contrast to all those security plans that exist on paper. So how do we even begin to make sense of this huge gap between the promise and the reality? Well, thankfully, there's a global framework that's actually designed to help us understand and tackle these exact kinds of challenges. It's called Sustainable Development Goal 16, or SDG 16 for short.
Think of SDG 16 as the world's shared blueprint for good governance. Its whole purpose is to build peace, make sure there's justice for everyone, and create strong institutions. Because really, without those things, you just can't make real progress in health or education or the economy.
I absolutely love this metaphor from the source material. Think about it this way. If hospitals and schools are the hardware of development, right, the physical things you build, then SDG 16, all that stuff about rule of law, justice, accountability, that's the essential software that makes the whole system actually run.
And this isn't just some vague, lofty idea. The goal is broken down into specific, measurable targets. You can see right here how the issues we've already been talking about, like the proportion of unsentenced detainees or providing legal identity, are actually core indicators that are used to track a country's progress.
And that brings us right here to the solution to our paradox. We've seen the strong laws on one side and the weak outcomes on the other. And the reason for this huge disconnect? Well, it has a name. And it's the single most important concept to understand this whole issue.
This is the heart of it, right here. Pakistan's biggest challenge isn't a lack of laws. It's a chronic implementation gap, a systemic failure to actually enforce the rules and to bridge that huge chasm between policy on paper and practice on the ground.
So, to boil it all down, the laws are on the books, but the reality on the ground is starkly different. The reason for that is a deep, systemic implementation gap. And really, the only way forward is to finally start closing that gap.
And that leaves us with one final thought. We've talked about systems and laws and global goals, but in the end,
Thanks for your time to learn, earn, and lead. This is Mohammad Zishan Awan, Advocate High Court. To join Vision 2047, please register with us and be part of the transformation.